I hope you guys can hear me. This is my first time ever doing a Facebook Live. I'm used to YouTube. I'm planning to move over to YouTube after I get it running, but right now the live's not working, so we have to use Facebook today. Hopefully next week I can get it up and running. So I'm just going to give a few more seconds for people to join if they are coming, and then I'll switch down and we can go to the painting. So today we are going to be painting a butterfly. You should have your water, a plate to put your paints on, like a porcelain plate like this, your watercolor paints, a brush, your paper, a pencil, and something to dry your brush on in between colors. Okay? If you have any questions during the session, you can just type me a comment. If you have access to that, or have a parent, type me a comment if you have a question or you need me to slow down. But yeah, so we're going to take it really easy. We're going to start by sketching our butterfly with pencil, and then we'll start to paint. We'll just take it slow, we'll go step by step, and I'm going to turn it down now to the painting, where we're going to start to tape down the sides if you have masking tape. If you don't, that's okay. It still works. The tape just helps the paper not to curl. So just bear with me while I get it all situated, okay? Okay, so what I want you to do if you have tape is that we're going to take long pieces of tape and we're going to tape down each side. So you can start with the top and you're just going to tape it to your table or whatever surface you're working on. And that's just going to make sure that your paper stays in place while we're painting and it doesn't curl up from the water. Okay, so our sides are all taped down. If you don't have tape, don't stress. It's not a big deal. I like to work with it, especially whenever I'm using a lot of watercolors, because the water sometimes can make the paint curl, can make it curl. Okay, so we're about to get started. So make sure you have your pencil. All right, so our butterfly, if you haven't seen a photo of a blue Morpho butterfly before, this is how it's gonna look. This is on the little sheets of watercolor paper. Some of you might have got it in your kit. I'm working on a bigger one that I also attached just so it's easier to see what I'm doing, but you can definitely do it on the smaller one. So we're gonna start by doing the body of the butterfly. So you're going to make his little head. And I'm doing two little bumps at the top of his head, and then his long body. And if it doesn't look quite like mine, do not worry about it. Every butterfly is going to look different. They're all unique in their own way. I think I'm noticing my video is upside down, which shows that I've never done a live before. So just give me a second to try to fix that. There we go. The butterfly is the right way up now. Happy I noticed that, because that would have been kind of hard to follow along too. All right, so we want to have his little head, which is just like a little ball. It doesn't matter if you could even do a line of like a ball first, because we're going to paint over this. So if it helps you to do the ball, do a little ball. On top of that, we're going to add 2 little bumps, and then we're going to do his body. Okay, so our next step is to do his wings. So he has these big, beautiful wings. So we're gonna do the first top of the wing, and then you're going to do like bumps on the side, because wings are not perfectly round. Then you're gonna make it come in and meet halfway down his body, okay? So you're gonna do the same thing to the other side, and don't worry if you're not happy with how it looks. I will give you time after to go with your eraser and fix anything you don't like, but for now we're just gonna start laying them down, okay? So try to do a wing on the other side that's similar to the first one. Doesn't have to be identical. It's pretty hard to draw exactly the same thing. And make sure that you make little bumps. His wing isn't perfectly round. And we're bringing it back to his body. So on that top of the wing, the butterfly has black. So you can see that here, that there is this black line that goes around the butterfly. So we're going to add that right now, just so we remember that it's there. So starting from your butterfly's shoulder area, if a butterfly has a shoulder, I don't know if they do, you're gonna go up, bring it around, and then we're gonna kind of end it somewhere in here, okay? And I actually think I needed to make that a little thicker, so I'm just going and making that a little thicker. So that's where the black's gonna be. And then we wanna do the same thing on the other side. And we're also making that a little bumpy. If you can see here, it's a little jagged. It's not perfectly like straight. I can show you up close with this one how I did little bumps here on the inside, made it a little bit jagged where the black line is, so it looks not perfectly straight, okay? So then, when you're done that, you can come in, and from these 2 bumps on top of his head, we're just gonna add his antennas. Just long, skinny antennas. Now, if I'm going too fast, you can try to let me know in the comments. I am watching the comments just to make sure that nobody is falling behind because I'm rushing, but I'm trusting that we're good to move on. I'll give us time after this, like I said, to go in and fix anything we want to fix, okay? So moving on to his bottom wings. So you're gonna go about 1/4 of the way into the wing, and it's gonna come down and then out. So it's going to be bumpy again. We don't want it to be just a perfect circle. And you're going to connect it to his body, but you don't want to leave a little pointy bit at the bottom because butterflies have little pointy bottoms. So leave a little space here, and then we're going to do it on the other side. So out from about quarter of the way in, we're going to make it like an invisible triangle in between the wings. We're going out and then around, and we're doing some jagged kind of lines. We don't want it to be perfectly symmetrical. And up. And then from about halfway, a little bit less than halfway down his body, so I'm gonna mark it over here so you can see, from about there, we're gonna start by doing our bottom line, and we're gonna bring it to the bottom, but then we're gonna kind of tailor it off like we did before. So trail it off, and if your lines are black or thicker than mine, don't worry, because these butterflies are so different, each and every one of them. Some of them have so much black, some of them have hardly any black. They're all just a little bit different. So you can see here how that black looks at the bottom. Don't worry about drawing it all the way around. We can paint that later, but we really just want to focus on where we're going to have the black thick and how it's going to go, okay? And also you can see how it's not perfectly straight, so don't focus on making a straight line. Do little bumps. I'm just going to go in with my eraser and fix some of the places that I wanted to correct before we continue, while you guys finish that part. And so the next part of our butterfly is where it really gets unique and you can really make it your own. So we're gonna add the lines inside of the butterfly. So you can see here, this butterfly has all of these lines. We're gonna go and we're gonna draw them with pencil first. If your lines end up looking different than mine, do not stress. Every butterfly is different, their lines are all unique. So I'm just gonna do the basics. So we're gonna start on the top wings. And so we're going to start in about the middle of his upper wing, where it connects to his belly, about the middle on each side. We're going to go out and make like this shape, okay? So we are adding that shape on both sides, and if they don't look the same on both sides, do not worry. It does not have to be the same. From those lines is going to be the basis of our butterfly lines. So I'm going to add one here, and you want to connect it to the other side. Okay, and there, and there. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side in the same sort of places. Okay. And then I'm going to space them out a little more, so not as close as up here, but I'm going to just go along the bottom of this line and add a few more that go out and connect. Okay. And you want to kind of make these lines dark because we want this pencil to show through our watercolor later. We're going to add the blue first, and then we're going to go back in and we're going to add the lines after. So we want them to poke through the watercolor. So make sure your lines are pretty dark when you're happy with them. When you're happy with the way they look, you can go back in and make them just a little darker, okay? So we'll give everybody a second to finish that part, and we're gonna move on to the bottom wing. Okay, so for the bottom wing, if you're not there yet, don't worry. I'm gonna give you a second to catch up after. We'll really take a moment after we've laid down just to make sure we're happy with everything. But starting from a little bit under where the wing at the bottom starts, so about here, if you can see where I marked right there, we are going to draw a line out, but it's gonna fork. So it's gonna have two coming off of it. And if it doesn't look like mine, once again, do not worry. Totally fine, because every butterfly is a little bit unique. Kind of like fingerprints on people. We all have different fingerprints. And butterflies have different patterns. Okay, so we're gonna fork out again on the other side. I'm just trying to do to both sides kind of the same pattern. And then I'm gonna go over here to the other side, and underneath that first one, give it a little space. Then I'm just gonna do a line, and once again, I'm going to do a fork, but this time I'm gonna go up that fork on the bottom and just put a few more lines that's connecting to where the black line is going to be. So we'll connect them to the bottom line that we made. And the same thing on the other side. So make your fork and add your lines going up. Okay, so that's the basis of our butterfly. We can go into paint very soon. Right now I'm going to give you a minute to just go over your butterfly, make sure you like the way it looks, fix anything with your eraser that you don't like. So we're gonna just take a minute for that, okay? I also want you to take this time to use your pencil, and I want you to sign the bottom of your butterfly. So with pencil, I want you to do your name at the bottom. I'm writing mine in cursive, but if you don't know how to do cursive, or you'd rather write it in a regular print, go for it. So you just want your name at the bottom because we want to know which artist made this beautiful painting. So take your time, and then we're going to go into paint, okay? So actually, while you guys are finishing that up, I'm going to put this paper over, and I'm just going to talk about some important things that I want to point out before we start painting. So, I've noticed whenever some friends do art and they have their brush and they want to do a thick line, they know that they have to push the whole brush down. Do you see how I'm pushing all the bristles down? Makes a pretty thick line. It's really good if you want to fill a lot of space in a fast time, or you have a big area to fill. Also, if I put the whole brush down, I put it all the way and I pull, it's going to make a thick line. So brush whenever you put all the bristles against the paper. you're always going to get a really thick line. Sometimes that's good, and that's going to come in handy when we need to fill in our butterfly, the blue parts, but when it comes to the lines around the edges, I want to show you a trick. So on your brush, you have a pointy little bristly end. I want you, whenever we do the tips of the butterfly, so the antennas, the body, the outside black outline, anywhere that needs the line to be pretty defined and small, it's important to just hold your brush almost like straight up, and I just want you to do the tip. I want you to touch the very tippy tip of the brush to the paper. Instead of smushing it all down like that, I want you to just gently do the tip of the brush. I'll remind you when we need to use that, but that's important to know because some people don't know if they've never done it before. So just gently touching with the tip. So we have to remember that, and I'll remind you, okay, whenever it comes time. So I'm hoping everybody's done their butterfly now, or tracing their butterfly. Everyone's added their name in pencil. And we're gonna start painting. We're gonna get into the fun part. So this is where the plate comes in handy. So we are going to use this blue right here on our palette. If you have the same palette as me, we're going to use it in the bottom half of the palette. Second row, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 from the side, okay? Fourth blue from the side. We are going to be using this one to start. So I want you to take your brush, get it nice and wet, really work in your brush. Here, I'll show you. Work your brush in to really activate that paint. You can grab a little more water if you need it. And then I want you to put the paint on your plate. So we're starting to grab that paint with our brush and we're putting it on our plate. So we're gonna start with that, and then we might have to grab more later, but just to get us started. So we have our paint on our plate. That's all the pigment that we got to lift off. Now I want you to grab more water and mix it in, because this is watercolor paint, so we want water to help it slide around, okay? So just fill it with some water, and when you're happy with the color, we can start adding it to our painting. So, starting at the edge of the wing, not the body, but at the edge of the wing, and you also can leave the black part at the top, that little edge that we worked on before, the black around, leave that blank. If you go over it, not a big deal because we can paint it black later, but we're filling in our wing now. So, with the watercolor, lots of water in it, you're going to start applying it, and you'll notice that watercolor, if you've never worked with it before, you can really spread it around. So work fast, long strokes, and spread it outward. You want to fill your whole wing with it. And now this is where that tip I taught you a second ago about using the tip of your brush gently, you can kind of outline the outside of your wing so you don't go onto the white part, you don't go too far. And then just fill it in, and if you feel like it's too dark, add a little more water on your brush and spread it around. The water that you add will make the paint less pigmented, so it will make it less dark. And remember that watercolor always dries a little bit lighter once it's dry. So whenever it's dark, it might look a little bit darker than when it's wet, it will look a little bit darker than what it's gonna look like when it dries. Okay? So I'm gonna grab more of that paint because I used up quite a bit there. Just a little more off my palette of that paint. Add more water. Get it nice and flowy. And then I'm gonna do the other side, same thing, filling it in blue. And if your paint color is looking different than mine, if it's looking darker or lighter, that's totally normal, because depending on how much water you have with your paint, it will affect how dark your watercolor is or how light your watercolor is. But that's kind of the beauty of watercolor, because everyone's painting ends up looking a little bit different, which is super cool. It's unique to you. And if you're doing this painting, I should have mentioned this earlier, because I am going to post this online later. If this is a friend doing this painting who doesn't have the same colors as the palette we're using, the kit that I posted, you can just use any blue watercolor paint that you have. And if you want to make it darker or lighter, then same thing. More water for lighter and less water for darker. So now I'm going to go in and grab more of that exact same color, get lots of paint back on my plate palette, and mix it up with the water, get the color that I like, the flowiness of the paint that I like. I want it to be nice and flowy. And I'm gonna start the bottom wing. If you're not there yet, don't worry. We'll take some time after. Make sure that you're caught up, or otherwise have a parent write me in the chat if I'm going too fast for my live friends watching this. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna fill in the entire bottom wing with this color. You can use the tip of your brush to go around and do those edges like we talked about. And if a little gets outside of the lines, don't worry at all about it. We're going to go in and outline it with some black later. And that's just something that happens in watercolor. It happens to everyone at some point in time. Watercolor flows in places that you never meant for it to go, but it always ends up making your piece unique to you. So don't stress if it gets outside of where you wanted it to go, okay? If you're finding that your paint's doing like this and it's not really flowing, you need more water. So if that's happening to you, just add more water to your brush or your palette and it will flow better, okay? Sometimes whenever we're learning watercolor, even myself, it's hard to get that balance of how much water to use with your paint. So I'm using the tip of my brush again to outline. And then the big part of my brush, flat bristles right to the paper to fill in the rest. You could do it small, but it would take a long time. But that's okay, if that's what you prefer to do. Okay, so I'll give you guys just a minute to catch up and finish that layer, and then we'll move on to adding a little bit more color into the wings. Now you might notice that your paper looks pretty wet, and that's normal because the paper absorbs the watercolor, and the watercolor is essentially water with pigment, so it is okay that it's wet. We can work wet on wet, so we can add more paint on top. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So in our palette, I want you to go in at the bottom. The bottom row of the whole palette and the outer tip, the first one on the outside, so away from where the brushes are, the total opposite side, there is this very dark blue. I'm gonna grab some of that. And I want you to mix it in with your other color, because we're making a darker blue. Okay? You can make that as dark or light as you want. You just want to add that in to create this nice blue color. So add the water, make it nice and flowy. Make sure it's all blended really nice. And that is going to be our darker color that we will add to this bit. So this top chamber where we drew our line, we're going to make that darker. So you can outline it like I showed you before with the tip of your brush. And we just want to make that darker. Cool. And do it on the other side. It's okay if it goes other places, if it flows into the wings, that's totally fine. These butterflies have all sorts of blue colors mixed into their wings, so it doesn't just have to be in these places. So do not stress if it goes outside of these zones, okay? So I want us to grab quite a bit of water on our brush. We want it to be pretty watery now. I'm gonna add it just here going out, but watch this. So I added the paint, I'm quickly going into my water, grabbing a bunch of water, and I'm blending it. Do you see that? Blend it out. So you can drop it in, and then with the water on your brush, just water, blend it out. That's something that takes time to learn, but once you get it, it's a really good thing to have in your toolbox for watercolor. So I'm going to show you again. I added lots of water to it to start. I'm adding it underneath on that top wing. Then I'm grabbing more water, just water on my brush, and I'm blending that edge out. Blend, blend, blend. And then you can go back in and drop a little more if you want to be a little darker. But always go back in with water on your brush, clean water, and blend it out. Okay? We just want to create like a shadow look on the inner part of his wing where it connects to the body. That part you don't have to do, but it looks pretty cool, and it's a really good way to learn some blending skills. So using the exact same blending skills, we're not going to do any solid pieces in here, but we're going to take that dark blue, same thing with blending like we just did. I want you to grab it on your brush, and at the very base of his wing where it kind of connects to his body, put that dark paint, grab some water, and blend those edges out. Just like that. It's okay if you have little streaks or lines, that's part of the beauty of watercolor. Sometimes those little streaks are what make it look unique and add something really special. So So even if you don't like them at the start, you might grow to love them later because I might add something to it that's really cool. So I'm adding water and I'm blending it out. Okay, so this is a point in time where you can decide if you like the color of your wings. If they're dark enough for you, then you can leave them and just take this time to let your painting dry a little bit. If you are like me and you're like, ooh, I love color, I love bright color, I want to make it a little darker, you can go back in with that first color, so that first blue that was row 2 at the bottom, so row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, row 5 down your palette, and 4 over that blue. You can add some water to that, and using a different place on your palette, so we don't want to use that darker color anymore, you can make a lighter color again, and we can just add a little more color over the parts that we want to make darker. If you don't want your butterfly to be darker, because they come in all shades, some of them are super light, some of them are super dark, then you can just take this time to let your butterfly dry a little bit. It's really good to let your watercolor dry a little bit in between coats too, because it makes it easier to paint on it. Because when you start adding different colors, like when we go in with black, it could spread to places you don't want it to, which happens, but sometimes we don't want it to. So I'm just gonna go in where we were before, and I can actually paint right over. It doesn't matter if you overlap that blue, because it just makes it look extra cool, because they are supposed to blend together. So do not worry, but if you don't want to go over it, don't worry. You can just go around it like that. And I'm just adding in some extra color for a little more vibrancy, because I love whenever my paintings are bright and eye-catching. So add it in. You see how I just went over the part that was supposed to be black with blue? Doesn't matter because we're covering it in black, so it's not a big deal. We can fix it later by covering it with black. So if you get it outside of where you're supposed to, don't worry. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. Just adding in extra color to make it extra bright. Sometimes, because watercolor is so sheer, you do have to go in with a second layer and build it up to create the look that you want. It's easier to add color than to take it away. And at any point, if you find the paint on your palette is getting a little bit dry, remember to add a little water to it. Maybe grab a little more pigment from your palette. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys a minute to just finish up your wings, let it dry for a second, and then we're gonna start on the body, okay? Now, if you have a hairdryer and you have an adult with you who lets you use it or uses it for you and helps you, if your painting is really wet, sometimes that can help it to dry a little faster. So it's not necessary. I'm not going to do it because I know not everyone is going to have one handy, but if you have one handy and you have a trusted adult who gives you permission or helps you, you can blow dry your painting at this point to help the paint kind of dry down so that we can work with it a little bit better. But that's totally optional. I'm just darkening here because I really love color. Like I said, I want it to be really poppin', but you don't have to. At this point, your painting's probably feeling pretty wet. That's normal. Just giving it that chance to dry. All right, hopefully it's dry. We're gonna work at the middle of it, but I'm also going to let it dry a little longer actually, and I'm gonna go over lines again, because that's where this is gonna come in super handy. So, with black, and honestly with the black, I'm taking it directly from the tray. I'm not putting it on my plate. You can totally put it on your plate. I'm not doing it because I just want my black to be really dark, so I don't need to really thin it out too much. I'm just putting paint onto my palette, sorry, not paint, putting water onto my palette with my brush and working it into the black and activating that black. But if you find it easier to transfer that black over to your plate palette, you can do that too, okay? So I just want to remind everybody, because this is where it comes in super important, that we're using the very tip of our brush. We're holding it kind of straight up, and you're just kissing the paper like a tiny tickle with your brush, with that tippy tip of your brush, because if we push, we're getting that thick line, which we don't want for our antennas, for example. If it happens, that's okay. It's all about learning. You can try again another time because now you know how to do it. So just try your very best. That's all we can ask, and we're all learning here. So just a reminder, the tip, just ever so gently, if you have a spare paper handy that you could grab before you do the antennas, for example, to practice on, if you have like a blank sheet of paper, one that you don't care about, a paper that's just scrap, I recommend trying this technique because it does take some getting used to. Just ever so slightly touching the page. And then if we push and we make all those bristles have contact with our paper, we're going to end up with a thick line. So I'm going to show you how that applies over here, where I made this kind of fake little wing sample. So I'm using the tip to just ever so gently touch the edge. Gentle, gentle, gentle outline. And then whenever I go in to fill in our line, because our line is pretty thick around the inside of the butterfly, that's when you can start to apply a little more pressure. Just a little bit, because if we go full ham, we end up with that. So we just want a little bit, and then you can work at applying just a little more pressure instead of pushing, okay? It takes time to get used to, but I believe you can do it. Okay, so hopefully our paper is dry enough to start working with. We're going to grab our black. So I'm just gonna move my plate palette out of the way because at this moment I don't need it. But if you're using your plate palette to put some black on, if it's easier for you, then totally fine, okay? So we're gonna start by doing his head. So with the tip of your brush, outline that circle, okay? And then color it in. So using that tip of the brush. And then he has those two little bumps we added at the top of his head. So go ahead and color those in with black using that tip of your brush to make those little bumps. Those are what his antennas are going to be connected to. Don't do the antennas yet. We're going to do that last. If you already did it, that's okay. But we're going to do it last if you haven't, because it's just easier to make sure we're not hitting the butterfly wing. So then I'm going to come down and I'm going to use the tip of my brush again to outline his body. So I'm using the black and the tip of my brush to outline his body. And then I'm just going to use my brush with a little more pressure like I showed you to make a bigger line. And I'm doing strokes downward to fill his body in with black. What I mean by that is, say this is our butterfly's body. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to scrub up and down because that actually gets a little messy and sometimes you lose control. But watch this. If I just stroke up, so I'm pulling the brush down gently and up, and then I'm going back and keep doing that over and over. And that gives you more control over what you're doing. Okay? And then, using the tip of your brush, like we talked about, you are going to outline the top of your butterfly wing with black. Don't worry if you follow the lines exactly, it's hard. So just outline the best that you can and add those bumps because his wings aren't perfectly round. That's what we need to remember. And then you're going to do the same thing on the inside of the butterfly. Use the tip of your brush to outline the bottom part of that black. And then you can color it in black using those strokes I showed you. The downward strokes or the up. You do one way, so it could be down or up. So right now I'm doing uplift, uplift, uplift. I'm not scrubbing it because I lose control if I do that. You have way more control over the paint whenever you do these one-way strokes. Perfect. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. So, just going to outline very gently with the tip of my brush that top part of his wing. And then the same thing, I'm going to do the inside line where it meets the blue. You want to have quite a lot of water on your brush, lots of pigment, but lots of water too, because you want it to flow really well. Helps with lines to make them look better and more like strong if they have a lot of flowy paints on them. And again, if your painting is not looking like mine, that's totally normal and fine, because every single piece of art should be unique and different to the artist. Everybody has their own unique style, and the colors are always flowing a little bit different. That's what makes it really cool, I think. So color all that black in. And then we are going to make a really small line. So using that very tip of our brush, we're just outlining the bottom part of his wing. And you don't even have to bring it all the way around, but you can. But don't go in here. Don't go past where we did that triangle for the wings, okay? So you're just using the tippy tip of your brush, not as thick as the top, or it could be, depending on how you want your butterfly to look. And we're just outlining a little bit of the outer part of the wing. Okay. And so now, I'm just give you just a moment to catch up, and then we're going to do the bottom parts. We're almost done our butterfly. It's getting pretty close. Okay, so I'm going to do this one a bit different. I'm going to do the inside line where it connects to the blue first, because I find it easier to work from the inside out on the bottom. Then I'm going to do the outside, and then fill it in. Make sure that it doesn't, remember, it doesn't have to be perfectly round. You can have little jags, or it can be a little uneveny, and that's totally normal. Every butterfly is unique, and it actually makes them look more realistic when the wings aren't super round, because butterfly wings aren't super round. I'm going to do the other side the same. And then I'm going to take the tippy tip of my brush, and just like on the top, I'm just going to do this really thin black outline of the butterfly. And you can make this thick. So if your line's thicker than mine, totally okay, because like I said before, these butterflies are so different. This actually is a species that has like a huge difference in the way they look. So sometimes the lines are really thick of black. But for mine, I just liked the way it looked right now, and I thought it was cool that it was thin. So if yours is different than mine, no stress at all. They all look a little different. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Okay, so this part is a little scary, I'm sure, because the lines are hard. We're going to do the antennas. So you can do it, and if yours are thicker than mine, do not worry, don't stress. Everyone is unique, and we're all learning here like we mentioned. So using that same technique, you can take the very tip of your brush and so gently touch your paper to make a line. And if this scares you and you don't want to do it, some artists actually use colored pencil to do these sorts of things if they think that it's too small or too hard. But I like to use paint, so you can choose which is best for you. If you feel like you want to do the pencil, you totally can. But we're just touching it ever so slightly. Once you're done the antennas, you can dry your brush, give your brush a good clean, dry it off. And if you are able to blow dry it with a family member, an adult, or you have permission from an adult to do so, now would be a good time to dry it off. If it's really wet, it will just help us, it'll just help us to be able to draw the lines on the butterfly. If it's really wet, it could be hard because the paints can kind of blend together and start to spread out. Okay, so if you're still working, just listen because I'm going to go over what we're going to do next to finish this butterfly. We are going to take a dark blue and we're going to do lines like we just did with the tip of our brush, lines over our butterfly lines that we did in pencil before. So hopefully you can still see them, you should be able to. And then we're going to finish this painting by adding his white dots on the black parts of his wings. So just let your painting dry a minute. If you don't want to do this with paint, you can do, as I mentioned, with colored pencil. So if you have a dark blue colored pencil that you would rather draw over the lines with, you can do that too, because some artists like to mix watercolor and colored pencil. For today, I'm going to do the watercolor lines because I really like to do that. If you choose to do the watercolor lines with me, you can do it and don't stress over it too much. If your watercolor is thicker than mine, if your lines look a little thicker, don't worry because all butterflies look different and it will just make yours unique and very special to you. If you choose to do it with pencil crayon, I suggest that you skip this step right now, let your butterfly dry and add those lines whenever all the paint is dry later, okay? So we don't want to start trying to color over with a colored pencil, because that will start to tear the paper because the paper's pretty vulnerable right now when it's wet. But if your painting is pretty dry, you don't want it to be soaking wet for this step because it will bloom out. I'm going to show you actually what happens whenever you try to do that. So if I have this really wet paint on my page, it's really wet, and then I go and I try to do a line over it, it's not going to stay thin, it's going to start to blur out. Can you see that, how it's kind of blooming out? Hopefully it's showing. It's just really hard to get a crisp line on very wet paper because it starts to kind of like flow out because watercolors like water, and if there's a lot of water then they'll start to flow. But if that happens to your painting, then it's totally fine, don't worry about it. It's all about learning, and hopefully your painting is dry enough to continue. If it's not, then just pay attention to this step and do it whenever you can if the painting dries in a little bit, okay? Because this step is pretty straightforward. I'm going to go over it. So I'm going to use my paint palette plate again. Get lots of water. I want you to mix that butterfly blue, so we're going to use this one again, the one that we used for the wings. I want you to get lots of paint on your palette. And then you're going to go and add that tippy blue again. So hopefully you can see that in the frame. It's the very bottom corner blue that we used before. Gonna use that. And we're gonna mix it in. Make it nice and dark. You want quite a lot of paint for this step because we don't want to have to kind of remix in the middle. It gets hard, but if you have to remix in the middle, no worries, it happens. Sometimes watercolor splashes, as you can see on my paper, I just did a watercolor splash. What you can do for that is just get a wet brush and blur it out. Just in the area where you did a splash, or you can leave the splash because some people really like watercolor splashes. It's a style. Okay, so we have that dark and light blue, and then we are going to go in with the black. I want you to just take a little bit of black on your brush and mix it in to make this dark color. And that is what we are going to make our lines with. So I almost made like a navy blue. So I used that dark blue in the corner, the light blue that we were using for our butterfly wings, and then I added in a little black to get a very dark blue color. And then we're gonna do the same thing as we did with the outline over our wing pattern. So using the tip of your brush, you're going to gently outline your lines inside your butterfly wing. And if your painting is too wet, just give it time. And at least you'll know what the next step is because we're almost done. So you can go back and do this on your own if you have to after your painting dries a little more, okay? And then we're going to do the bottom of the wing and connect it to the black where we did the black outline. Then I'm going to the other side and I'm doing the same thing. And then on the bottom, connecting it on the side to the black. And if it looks really dark, don't worry because remember, watercolor always dries lighter than it looks whenever it's wet. You might notice, I don't know if you can see, but whenever I was doing the paint earlier, I got some splatters on my paper. And sometimes that happens in watercolor too, and at the moment that it happens, you're always like, ugh, I didn't mean to do that. But then after I'm looking at it, I'm like, you know what, that's kind of cool. makes it unique, and no one else is going to have the exact same splatters as me, so I've learned to love those happy little accidents. Cool. I'll give you guys a moment to catch up, and we're almost done. We're on our last step after that. We have to add the white onto our wings. So when you're done, or if you have an adult who's around, you could ask them for a fresh glass of water or a fresh cup of water or bowl of water, because we really don't want our yucky, dark, blackish blue water that we're dealing with. I'm sure your water is kind of looking like mine right now. It's pretty yucky. And if we try to blend white with that, it's gonna turn gray or blue. So you should take a moment and grab a fresh cup of water. I have one that I'm gonna grab fast. Just a cup that I had on the side, ready to go. Hopefully when you're done this, your black should be dry enough to paint on top of. If it's not dry enough, then blow dry it or wait for this painting to dry before you add any white, because if you start to try to add some white onto the black and it's still pretty wet, it's going to turn gray or murky, and we don't want that because we want these beautiful white spots on our butterfly. So I'm going to show you what that's going to look like. So these little white spots, which is unique to every blue Morpho butterfly. Some of them have thick black, like I told you, and some of them have like so many white spots, and then others have just a few like this, and I think some have none. So if you don't want to add white spots, you don't have to, but I think it's kind of cool because it looks unique and it adds a little extra pop of fun to the wings. So hopefully you're ready to go. Just to give you a few more seconds, and then we're going to do that white, and then we'll be done. Good job to the ones who did this with me. I want to know how your butterfly turned out. So after this video, maybe you can have mom or dad write me and send me a photo or tell me how it went. And I'd love to hear and see your photos. So make sure your brush is nice and clean from all that color we used. I want you to give it a good scrub in that clean water. Dry it off, make sure we get all that pigment out of there. And hopefully you are ready to go. If you're not, then just listen and you'll be able to do it after the session's done and your painting is dry enough to work with, okay? So I'm going directly in the pan again. You don't have to, but for this step, to get the white to be really, really nice and pigmented and white, it is probably best just to work right out of the pan. So I'm gonna wet my brush. Gonna really work it into that white. Really want to activate that white. Okay, I'm using a little more water. Really activate that white. I want lots of color mixed in with the water. And then I want you to take like a big bunch of that white on your brush, and we can start to add our white dots. This part's fun. Your dots can go all the way down. You can add some to the bottom, wherever you want, okay? And they don't have to be round, they can be different colors. What I'm asking you to try to do, though, is what you do to one side, try to do to the other for the wings, for the butterfly stamps. I think that they usually are pretty similar. Don't have to be the exact same, but I think they usually have the same pattern on both sides. And I'm pretty happy with that for mine. So clean off our brush. And there we have it. Awesome. So one other thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning is that it's always a good idea to put the dates on your paintings, because then it's really cool. You can go back later and you can see, when did I do this? How old was I? Or what month did I do it in? And then you can look back at them and you can see how you've progressed over time. So underneath your name, if you have room, or above, or on the back of your sheet when it's dry, somewhere, I want you to put the date. So I'm just gonna put day, month, year. So I'm gonna put 02/06/2024. So the 2nd of June, 2024. And then we can go back and we can see our work over time, and it's a pretty cool thing to do. I look at some of the paintings I did 15 years ago, and it's really cool to be able to see how much I've learned and how my style has kind of developed, and it's really a fun thing to do. So that is the end of our painting. I am so happy that a couple of you joined me, and I hope that you found it easy to follow. Once again, if you enjoyed this or you have any comments, I would love if you'd send me a message and send me a photo of how your butterfly turned out. Let me know how you liked it. Yeah, and if you have any suggestions of what you would like to paint in the future, I'm all ears. I love hearing your suggestions, and I always try to incorporate them somehow if I can. So I am looking forward to our next session. And one more thing, if you taped down the sides of your watercolor painting, I want you to leave them until your painting is completely dry, because this makes the paper stay flat when it dries, and if you remove them, the paper can start to crumple. So I want you to leave those tape pieces on, if you have them, until it's completely dry. It usually takes about 20 minutes or so. So maybe go have a snack or go have a play, and then come back later, and I want to show you, mine's not dry, so I'm going to leave it taped, but when you undo the tape, if you have taped it, you have to gently, gently, gently peel the tape off away from the paper, okay? That will just make it not rip, because if you just rip it off, sometimes it takes away the surface of the paper, and that happens to everyone. That happens to me to this day sometimes whenever I'm doing my paintings, but it's nice to try to avoid it. So just try to peel it gently. And yeah, if you didn't have tape and you want your painting to dry flat, you could take something that's kind of heavy, like books, and just put them on the outsides, not where there's any paint, but just on the outsides while it dries, to kind of try to keep it as flat as possible. And yeah, there we go. So I'm gonna leave it standing for just a minute, if you need to finish up, so you can have something to look at, so you know what to do. But that is the end of our painting for today. So I'm gonna leave this up for about a minute or two, just facing the painting, so that you can see any last steps maybe you need to catch up on. But thank you once again for joining me, and I hope that you enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to trying this again next week. Bye for now.